Lust doesn't destroy you in one moment. It destroys you slowly, softly, beautifully, until the beauty becomes a trap, and the trap becomes your identity. Carl Jung never saw lust as something sinful. He saw it as something dangerous, something that feels like life at first, but starts hollowing you from the inside the more you feed it, something that promises intimacy, but leaves you emptier than before. Lust is the fastest path to self-destruction because it disguises itself as freedom. It pretends to liberate you while quietly chaining you to impulses you can't control. It feels empowering in the beginning, the attention, the thrill, the chase, the validation, the temporary sense of being wanted. Jung believed that lust is one of the mind's strongest illusions, the illusion that physical connection can replace emotional connection, that desire can replace meaning, that pleasure can replace purpose. But the body doesn't lie, and the soul can't be tricked. Every time you chase lust without awareness, you lose a piece of yourself. Not because the act is wrong, but because you're using desire to silence something deeper. People don't seek lust because they're strong. They seek lust because they're starving. Starving for affection, for attention, for escape, for validation, for a moment where they don't have to feel the weight of being unloved. Lust becomes a distraction from the real wound, the wound of feeling emotionally empty. And the more empty you feel, the more lust you chase. It's a cycle Jung warned about. The more you run from your shadow, the more your shadow controls you. Lust is one of the shadow's favorite masks. It looks like attraction, but it's really avoidance. It looks like confidence, but it's really insecurity. It looks like connection, but it's really loneliness. Wearing perfume. That's why lust never satisfies, not for long, because it's not meant to. Lust doesn't want to heal you. It wants to own you. It gives you a temporary high, then leaves you lower than before. And in the silence, after the thrill, you start feeling the truth you were running from, the emptiness, the confusion, the questions you don't want to face. Why am I doing this? Why do I always end up here? Why does it never feel enough? Lust doesn't destroy you with pleasure. It destroys you with repetition. It teaches your brain to chase dopamine like it's oxygen. It teaches your heart to confuse desire with love. It teaches your soul to stay numb. You become addicted to the feeling of being wanted, even if the wanting is shallow. You become addicted to bodies because you've forgotten how to handle emotions. You become addicted to the chase because real connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability terrifies you. Jung said that lust is the misuse of life energy. Libido, the energy meant for growth, creativity, purpose, gets hijacked by the body. Instead of building your life, you start burning it. Instead of rising, you start collapsing inward. Instead of evolving, you start escaping. Lust gives you a momentary sense of being alive. But when the moment fades, so does your sense of self. You start seeing your body as your value. Your desirability becomes your worth. Your cravings become your identity. That's how self-destruction begins. Not in the act, but in the belief that you need the act to feel whole. Lust promises warmth, but gives you fire. And fire feels safe, until it doesn't, until it burns you in the same places you were already wounded. Jung believed that lust becomes destructive when it replaces intimacy, when it becomes a shortcut to feeling close without actually being close, when it becomes a way to forget yourself, not a way to express yourself. Because lust without consciousness isn't passion, it's escape. It's self-abandonment disguised as pleasure. It's the body taking control because the soul stopped participating. And that is where the destruction begins, not in the bedroom, but in the mind, not in the moment, but in the aftermath, not in desire, but in the emptiness that follows it. You wake up realizing that nothing you chased filled the silence inside you. The pleasure didn't erase the loneliness. The attention didn't fix the insecurity. The desire didn't answer the question, do I matter? Lust never answers that question. It only asks for more bodies, more attention, more distraction, more intensity. But the more you feed lust, the more it feeds on you, until you're left with a life full of moments but no meaning, a body that's touched but a soul that's untouched, a heart that's constantly beating but never belonging. That is why Jung called lust the fastest path to self-destruction. Not because desire is wrong, but because desire without depth becomes a doorway to emptiness. And emptiness is the one thing lust can never fill. Lust feels powerful in the moment, but slowly it starts taking more from you than it gives. Not your dignity, not your morality, something much deeper, your sense of self. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He believed that lust becomes destructive not because of the act itself, but because of what it replaces inside you. It replaces connection with craving, intimacy with impulse, healing with distraction, and slowly, you forget what genuine closeness even feels like. Because lust gives you something love doesn't give instantly. A shortcut. It's the fastest escape from loneliness, the fastest escape from insecurity, the fastest escape from emotional pain. And that's why it destroys you. You start depending on shortcuts instead of depth. Pleasure becomes your medicine. Attention becomes your oxygen. And desire becomes your identity. 1. When lust destroys self-worth. People don't chase lust because they're confident. They chase lust because it's the only place they feel wanted. Even if that want is shallow. Even if it disappears by morning. Even if it leaves you emptier than before. You begin to confuse being desired with being valued. And that's when lust becomes a poison. Because desire isn't love, attention isn't affection, and attraction isn't intimacy. But lust makes you forget this. It tells you that as long as someone wants your body, you don't need to face the wounds inside your heart. 2. When lust creates emotional numbness. The more you chase physical desire, the less you feel emotional desire. Your brain becomes lucid for intensity, for thrill, for immediacy. Love feels too slow. Affection feels too soft. Stability feels boring. And your heart? It stops responding to warmth because it's been trained to respond only to fire. You begin to crave the things that hurt you and avoid the things that could heal you. Lust slowly replaces your emotional hunger with physical hunger, and a body can be fed 1,000 times while a soul starves quietly inside it. 3. When lust breaks your inner compass. Jung believed that the soul speaks in quiet symbols, but lust is loud, too loud. It drowns out intuition. It drowns out wisdom. It drowns out the inner voice that warns you when something is wrong. Your decisions stop coming from awareness and start coming from desire. You ignore red flags. You chase people who don't care. You fall into situations you later regret, not because you're reckless, but because you're disconnected from your own truth, your own needs, your own emotional reality. 4. When lust turns into self-betrayal. Lust becomes destructive when you start crossing your own boundaries. When you say yes, even though your heart says no. When you let people into your body who you would never let into your life. When you choose the high over the healing, you betray your standards, your values, your intuition, not because you're weak, but because you're wounded. Every time you betray yourself, you lose a little self-respect, a little identity, a little power, until one day you wake up and feel like a stranger in your own skin. 5. When lust rewires the brain. Jung said that whatever you feed grows. Lust feeds dopamine, one of the most addictive chemicals in the brain. And the brain loves shortcuts. It begins to crave the fastest way to feel good. It stops caring about long-term consequences. It stops valuing emotional connection. It starts needing more intensity just to feel alive. Lust trains the brain to want more while feeling less. 6. When lust takes away the self. This is the deepest destruction Jung warned about. At the final stage, lust stops feeling exciting. It stops feeling thrilling. It stops feeling like anything at all. That's when you know the fire has eaten too much. You're left with emptiness, shame, confusion, craving without satisfaction, touch without meaning, connection without closeness, body without soul. This is the point where many people hit rock bottom, not because lust ruined their life, but because it hollowed their spirit. 7. When lust makes you fear love. Once you become dependent on physical desire, real intimacy starts to terrify you. Love requires vulnerability. Lust only requires access. Love asks for truth. Lust asks for nothing. Love sees your wounds. Lust hides them. You start pushing away people who care and clinging to people who do not. Not because you don't want love, but because love feels too honest, too exposing, too real. When lust becomes your emotional shield, you stop knowing how to be touched with tenderness. You crave fire, but fear warmth. And that's the quiet tragedy Jung spoke of. Lust doesn't destroy your body. It destroys your ability to be loved. 8. When the soul intervenes. But Jung believed there's a turning point. The moment lust stops numbing you. The moment the high stops working. The moment after the thrill, when you sit in silence and ask, "Why do I feel so empty?" Lust doesn't begin as destruction. It begins as curiosity, as excitement, as the spark you think will fill your loneliness. It feels alive. It feels human. It feels like connection, something your heart has been starving for. But slowly, quietly, it becomes something else, something darker, something that doesn't hold you, but uses you. Carl Jung believed that lust becomes dangerous the moment it turns into a replacement for emotional intimacy. The moment desire becomes a shortcut, a way to avoid the parts of yourself you're afraid to face. Because lust is easy. Love is not. Lust is fast. Love takes time. Lust distracts. Love exposes. And exposure is what the wounded mind fears most. So instead of healing, you choose hunger. You choose intensity. You choose the rush that feels like meaning, but isn't. That's where the self-destruction begins. When desire becomes an escape instead of an expression. People don't get addicted to lust because it feels good. They get addicted because it is the one place where they don't feel empty. Even if it's only for a few seconds. After years of emotional neglect, years of being ignored or misunderstood, years of carrying loneliness like a second skin, the body starts searching for something the heart never got, and the closest substitute it finds? Lust. It feels like intimacy. It feels like validation. It feels like you matter, even if just for a moment. But what you feel is illusion. Lust gives presence without connection, closeness without emotion, attention without affection. It teaches your brain that pleasure equals worth. And that's the beginning of the cycle Jung warned about. The body becomes louder than the soul. The mind becomes weaker than desire. Your choices stop coming from consciousness and start coming from craving. Lust becomes a language your wounds start speaking. Every time you feel lonely, you crave touch. Every time you feel insecure, you crave attention. Every time you feel unloved, you crave bodies. Not because you want pleasure, but because you want silence. The silence that comes after the high. The silence where pain stops mattering for a few minutes. The silence where you forget yourself. But forgetting yourself is not healing. It's self-abandonment. And the more you abandon yourself, the more empty you become. And emptier people chase lust the hardest. Jung described lust as the shadow's hunger. The shadow doesn't want love. It wants distraction. It wants intensity. It wants sensation. Because sensation is easier than self-reflection. Lust becomes self-destruction when you use it to avoid the emptiness you're scared to sit with. Because if you sit with it, you'll have to admit that you've never felt truly loved. You'll have to admit that someone broke your trust. You'll have to admit that intimacy scares you. You'll have to admit that desire is the only place you feel powerful. Instead of healing those wounds, lust lets you pretend they don't exist. For a few minutes, you get to feel wanted. For a few minutes, you get to feel alive. For a few minutes, you get to forget everything you hate about yourself. But afterwards, the emptiness returns, a little heavier, a little darker, a little more permanent. This is why lust becomes addictive. You start chasing the high to escape the low you created by chasing the high. You're not addicted to pleasure. You're addicted to avoidance, to distraction, to not feeling anything deeper. Lust becomes the fastest way to destroy yourself because it tricks you into thinking you're in control. But the truth is, you're controlled by what you're trying to escape. You're controlled by the wounds you refuse to look at. You're controlled by an emptiness you keep feeding with things that can't fill it. And slowly, you become someone you don't recognize, someone who uses desire to cope, someone who confuses lust with love, someone who feels a little more hollow after every thrill. Jung believed that lust disconnects you from your soul because the soul speaks through vulnerability, and lust demands the opposite: numbness, distraction, intensity without intimacy. It becomes self-destruction when you start losing your standards, your boundaries, your emotional depth, your self-respect, your ability to be alone, your ability to love. Every time you choose lust over healing, you choose temporary relief over long-term wholeness. And temporary relief always comes with a price. Jung wrote that what you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate. If you don't confront the wound that drives lust, it will keep choosing for you, choosing the same pain, the same emptiness, the same self-betrayal. Lust becomes self-destruction when you start treating your body as currency, your desire as identity, and your craving as meaning. That question is your soul waking up. It is the beginning of awareness. It is the first step toward healing. Because what you truly want is not lust, but meaning, not intensity, but connection, not bodies, but belonging. When the soul gets tired of lust, it starts pulling you toward depth, toward consciousness, toward a life that doesn't destroy you. Desire was never the enemy. The real danger was the emptiness you tried to fill with it. If this video made you see your cravings in a different light, if it touched the part of you that keeps choosing fire over healing, you're not alone. Like, comment, and subscribe to Psychatic, where the shadow is understood, the soul is respected, and awareness begins with you.